It was an ordinary afternoon on a quiet street in Louisiana when Senator John Kennedy's car came to a sudden stop. What caught his eye wasn't a political protest, a campaign sign, or even a broken-down vehicle. It was a young girl, barely in her teens, holding up a cardboard sign that read in shaky handwriting, $5 for a hug. At first, it seemed unusual or maybe even silly, but there was something in her eyes that froze him. They weren't the eyes of someone chasing pocket money for candy or fun. They were the eyes of someone carrying a weight too heavy for her age. John rolled down his window and asked gently, "Sweetheart, what's with the sign?" The girl hesitated, then whispered, "I just a broken bar. I just need help. I thought maybe if I gave hugs, someone might care enough to stop." Her voice cracked as if it had been holding back tears for far too long. Without hesitation, John pulled his car over, stepped out, and walked toward her. She looked nervous. People had probably walked past her all day, some even mocking her, others pretending she didn't exist. But John extended his arms and said, "How about I take one of those hugs?" The girl dropped the sign, ran into his arms, and clung to him as if letting go would mean losing the only anchor she had left. She sobbed into his shoulder, and for several moments, neither of them spoke. Passers-by slowed down, watching the scene unfold, but Kennedy's focus was solely on this child who had silently cried out for help. After she calmed down, John led her to a nearby bench. "Tell me your name," he said softly. "Lily," she whispered. "And where's your family, Lily?" he asked. That was when the flood of her story came out. Lily's mother had passed away the year before. Her father, once a hard-working man, had spiraled into alcoholism and had recently abandoned her. With no relatives willing to take her in, Lily had been bouncing between shelters and the streets. The $5 hug sign wasn't about money, it was her desperate attempt to feel human connection in a world that had overlooked her. Kennedy listened in silence, his heart heavy. In his years of public service, he had seen suffering, but something about this fragile girl's courage pierced him deeply. He knew he couldn't just walk away. "Lily," he said firmly, "you're not going to stand out here alone anymore. I promise you that." He took her to a nearby diner, bought her a warm meal at the first she'd had in days, and began making phone calls. Within hours, he connected with a local children's advocacy group he trusted. But John didn't just hand her off and move on. He visited the shelter himself, making sure Lily had a safe place to sleep, clothes to wear, and counselors who could help her heal. The story didn't end there. Kennedy quietly covered her school fees, arranged mentoring programs, and ensured she had a stable path forward. Lily, who once stood on the roadside begging for hugs, found herself in a loving foster home that would later become her permanent family. Months later, when she was invited to speak at a community event, she stood nervously at the podium. Her voice trembled as she looked out at the audience, and then her eyes found Senator Kennedy sitting in the front row, smiling warmly. "He stopped for me when no one else would," she told the crowd. "I wasn't asking for money. I wasn't asking for pity. I just needed someone to see me, to care enough to stop." And because he did, my whole life has changed. The audience erupted in applause, but Kennedy simply nodded, as if to say, "Every child deserves to be seen. I just did what anyone should do." From that day forward, Lily's story spread across the state, inspiring thousands. Schools started hug campaigns to raise awareness about loneliness and the importance of kindness. Shelters saw an increase in volunteers, and people began to realize that sometimes the smallest act, as stopping your car for a signal, could rewrite the story of someone's life. As for Lily, she grew into a strong, hopeful young woman. She often said that the hug she gave that day didn't just save her, it saved her belief in humanity. And John Kennedy? He drove away that afternoon with a lesson etched in his heart: It's not laws or speeches that change the world, it's compassion, shown in the moments when nobody's watching. Because sometimes, the greatest impact comes not from grand gestures, but from simply stopping a broken bar and caring enough to hug someone who needs it most.